I watched a teenage girl stumble into a cruise ship hallway, her white shirt soaked in blood. Across the Caribbean, a man in all black cornered a 16-year-old boy on an empty deck at 2 a.m. And in the middle of the ocean, 6 passengers sat inches from a dead man in a hot tub for over 2 hours without realizing it. These aren't urban legends. These are real events that happened on luxury cruise ships, and I was there for one of them. What you're about to hear will change how you see that floating paradise forever. But before we begin, if stories like this keep you up at night, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications because we post new terrifying true stories every day. Now, let me tell you what really happens when thousands of strangers are trapped together in the middle of the ocean with nowhere to run. I never imagined my first Alaskan cruise would haunt me for the rest of my life. It was late July, the summer of 2017, and I had booked a week-long voyage departing from Seattle. I was 35, recently unemployed, and desperate for an escape. The ship was enormous, carrying over 3,000 passengers, and as we pulled away from the dock that Sunday afternoon, everything felt like a dream. Steel drums played, families laughed, and the Seattle skyline faded into gray mist behind us. My cabin was located on the 8th deck, starboard side, positioned near the middle of the ship. Directly across the hallway in room 8237 lived a family I would never forget. A tall man with dark hair, his wife, and their 3 teenage daughters. The mother's name was Christy, and every time we passed in the corridor, she had this genuine, bright smile that made you feel welcomed. That first evening, she joked about her daughters devouring ice cream cones. Her laugh was infectious, the kind that makes you smile even when you don't know the context. Little did I know, within 48 hours, that same hallway would be covered in blood, and I would hear screams that still wake me up at night. Monday brought us through the spectacular inside passage. Rain streaked the windows, but I spent hours watching steep forested slopes disappear into the mist. That evening in the dining room, I noticed the family from across the hall again. The daughters were playfully arguing about dessert, while their father jokingly protested ordering a second steak. Christy touched his arm affectionately. Everything appeared completely normal, just another happy family on vacation. Tuesday morning, our ship docked in Juneau. I joined a tour group to Mendenhall Glacier, where massive walls of blue ice rose like frozen tsunamis. We departed port at exactly 4 p.m, heading toward Skagway. The captain announced over the intercom that we would be cruising through Glacier Bay overnight, promising stunning views near Margerie Glacier at dawn. That evening, I attended a Motown tribute show in the theater, then retreated to my cabin around 11. The ocean was remarkably calm, creating a gentle rocking motion as I prepared for bed. I left my balcony door cracked slightly to let in the fresh air and fell asleep to the rhythmic hum of the engines below. If you've ever been on a cruise ship, leave a comment below telling us about your experience. Was it everything you dreamed of, or did something unexpected happen? Sometime after 9 p.m, a loud thud jolted me awake. At first, I assumed it was just a wave hitting the hull, but then I heard shouting. 2 distinct voices, one male and one female, echoed through the hallway outside. I checked my phone, 9:48. The shouting stopped abruptly, replaced by rapid footsteps and the metallic clang of a door slamming shut. I listened for another minute, convinced it was probably just late-night partying, and tried to fall back asleep. At 9:55, another sound exploded through the wall behind my headboard. It sounded like heavy furniture crashing to the floor. Then came a scream. Not a playful scream, not an excited shriek, but a raw, primal sound that made every hair on my body stand up. I jumped out of bed, threw on jeans, and flung open my door. What I saw in that hallway would become the image that replays in my mind every single night. The corridor was initially empty, but the screaming continued, now mixed with the desperate crying of children. It was coming from room 8237, directly across from me. Other passengers began emerging from their cabins, confusion and fear written on their faces. A man in pajamas hurried toward the commotion. Someone hit the emergency call button mounted on the wall. Then the cabin door burst open from the inside. One of the teenage daughters staggered into the hallway. Her white shirt was stained bright crimson. She was sobbing so violently she couldn't form words, only pointing back into the room with a shaking hand. The next few seconds felt like they were happening in slow motion, as if time itself had fractured. The father appeared in the doorway. Blood covered both his hands and was streaked across his face. But what terrified me most was his expression. His eyes were wide but strangely distant, as if he were looking through all of us rather than at us. His mouth moved, and I heard one sentence with perfect clarity. She wouldn't stop laughing at me. He took a step forward into the hallway. The girl backed away, screaming for help. A passenger immediately blocked the man's path with arms spread wide. Another passenger began yelling for security. Within seconds, 2 uniformed crew members arrived, followed by a third carrying a radio. They ordered everyone to step back. One crew member quickly guided the daughters down the corridor. The others entered the cabin. I caught a brief glimpse inside before the door closed. An overturned lamp, shattered glass scattered across the floor, sheets soaked dark, and a foot on the carpet, completely motionless. Before we continue, please hit that like button if you're finding this story as chilling as I do. Your support helps us bring more true stories to light. The ship's public address system crackled to life. Medical team to deck 8 midship, cabin 8237. Repeat, medical emergency. Passengers pressed themselves against the walls as 2 nurses sprinted past, pushing a cart loaded with oxygen tanks and trauma supplies. The father didn't resist when security restrained him using plastic flex-tie handcuffs. His eyes looked glassy, almost serene, as if the chaos surrounding him was happening to someone else entirely. A crew member eventually told me to return to my cabin. My hands shook so badly I dropped my keycard twice before successfully unlocking my door. Inside, the silence felt suffocating. I walked out onto my balcony where pale twilight still hung over the black ocean. In Alaska during July, true darkness never comes. Low clouds glowed orange and purple above distant mountain peaks. I sat on my bed listening to muffled voices and the clatter of equipment through the wall. After approximately 20 minutes, a different announcement sounded over what I would later learn was the crew-only channel. It was a code that meant situation contained. I never slept again that night. By dawn, the ship had slowed as we entered Glacier Bay. Mountains rose on both sides, their peaks dusted with snow even in midsummer. Light rain speckled my balcony door. The ship's naturalist began her scheduled narration about sea lions and calving glaciers. But every passenger I encountered looked shell-shocked, whispering about what had happened during the night. Rumors spread faster than wildfire. Some said it was a fight over money. Others claimed it was a stranger attack or even a terrorist incident. Only a handful of people knew the actual truth. Around 8 in the morning, the captain made a formal announcement. His voice sounded steady but unmistakably shaken. Due to a serious incident last night, we have notified the FBI and United States Coast Guard. Authorities will board the ship in Juneau for a full investigation. Out of respect for the family involved, we ask for your cooperation and privacy. But the nightmare was far from over. What happened next would reveal just how quickly paradise can transform into a crime scene. Yellow police tape blocked off the entire section of Deck 8, where cabin 8237 was located. Security officers stood guard around the clock. I went to the buffet for breakfast, but could barely swallow a piece of toast. The faces around me looked pale, eyes constantly darting toward entrances, as if expecting danger to return at any moment. The 3 daughters were kept in a staff office with a counselor. Someone mentioned they would be flying home from Juneau. No one spoke the mother's name aloud, but everyone felt her absence like a cold wind cutting through the ship. At noon, heavy rain pounded the decks as we docked in Juneau for the second time. Federal agents in dark jackets boarded first, followed by local police officers. Passengers crowded against windows, watching as evidence bags and camera equipment rolled up the gangway. I couldn't bring myself to watch. Instead, I found an empty lounge at the ship's stern and sat facing a wall of rain-streaked glass. I kept seeing the father's blood-covered hands hanging loosely at his sides, as if everything happening was completely ordinary. Later, I learned that passengers from the adjacent cabin, after hearing screams, had rushed in first. They found Christy on the floor with her head and the pillows soaked in blood. The girls were crying and desperately trying to stop the bleeding. One man physically pulled the husband away, while another called for emergency services. Within minutes, crew members had restrained him, but the damage was irreversible. Christy died before the medical team could reach her. This is incredibly difficult to share, but these stories need to be told. If you think more people should hear about what really happens on cruise ships, please share this video. And make sure you're subscribed because we have 2 more disturbing stories coming up. Once we had cell service in port, news spread instantly. My phone lit up with headlines. Cable news stations ran the same short video clip of the ship docked in Juneau. Rain falling. FBI vans parked beside stacks of luggage. The husband's mugshot appeared before dinner time. Blank stare. Bruises visible on his arms. Court documents revealed he had told agents the exact same thing I heard. She wouldn't stop laughing at me, as if that sentence somehow explained the inexplicable. The cruise line canceled the evening entertainment, but attempted to keep other activities running. Some passengers still attended pub trivia and ordered frozen drinks by the pool under the covered roof. But everywhere I walked, I felt a hush, as if the ship itself was holding its breath. That night, we sailed toward Ketchikan. The captain warned that rough weather was approaching. Small whitecaps were already slapping against the windows. I closed my balcony door tightly. In bed, I kept the lamp on and scrolled through the same few news articles until the words blurred together. Outside, the ship creaked with each lean, but the engines maintained their steady drone. In that sound, I felt both comfort and dread. The awareness that a vessel can be massive, brightly lit, full of cameras and security staff, yet still unable to keep one cabin safe. Thursday morning brought sunshine as we reached Ketchikan. I joined a walking tour, grateful to step onto solid ground. The guide discussed totem poles and salmon, but half the group kept checking their phones, reading updates about the arraignment in Juneau. The judge had denied bail. The husband would be transported to Anchorage, then to a federal detention facility. That fact should have brought me peace. But something about this voyage had fundamentally changed how I saw the world. Back aboard, the taped-off section of Deck 8 remained closed. A housekeeping cart sat abandoned outside cabin 8237, fresh linens folded and ready, though no one would ever sleep there again during this voyage. Crew members walked past without looking, eyes forward, trained to move grief out of sight. Friday, we cruised the open Pacific toward Victoria, British Columbia. Gray waves rolled endlessly toward the horizon. Passengers filled the theater for a cooking demonstration, anything to feel normal again. I sat in the back row, listening to pots clang on stage while memories replayed in an endless loop. The scream, the blood, the father's empty stare. I realized the worst horror was its complete ordinariness. Nothing supernatural, no shadowy intruder, just a sudden psychological break in a place specifically designed for smiles and sunsets. Saturday evening, as we docked in Victoria's inner harbor, the captain thanked passengers for our understanding during an unprecedented week. Bagpipes played on the pier for atmosphere, but applause felt hollow. Many passengers skipped the final gala dinner. Those who attended wore dark colors, as if attending an unspoken memorial. Around midnight, the ship's horn sounded one final time, and we began the overnight journey back to Seattle. I stood on an upper deck, wind numbing my face, watching Victoria's lights fade. Below my feet, thousands of people slept inside a steel shell, trusting thin walls and strangers' goodwill. I felt the weight of that trust like something fragile cradled in my hands. Sunday morning, we cleared customs in Seattle. Gray clouds hugged the hills. Passengers streamed off the gangways, dragging souvenirs and half-empty sunscreen bottles. Reporters waited beyond the security fence with cameras ready. I walked past them, rolling my small suitcase, trying not to look toward the lenses. That afternoon, back in my apartment, I unpacked slowly. For the first time, I noticed how quiet my city block was compared to a ship's constant hum. Yet I couldn't relax. Days later, news confirmed additional details. The wife had suffered fatal blunt force trauma. The daughters told investigators their parents had been arguing about the husband's drinking. Friends asked if I would cruise again. I said maybe, knowing the answer was absolutely not, at least not for a very long time. When I think of Alaska now, I picture gray water under thin rain, broken by reflections of bright ship lights. I remember how cabin walls look identical whether people inside are laughing or begging for help. Most travelers bring back photographs of glaciers and whales. I brought back something very different. A story I never wanted. A reminder that horror can walk beside you on a sunny deck, hidden in plain sight, until the moment it steps through an unlocked door. But that wasn't the only disturbing incident I learned about at sea. What I discovered next proved that danger on cruise ships comes in forms you would never expect. We sailed out of Port Canaveral on the first Sunday of March, 2002. The air was warm enough to taste approaching spring, but still carried a cool edge in the late afternoon wind. My boss, Rebecca Carter, was celebrating her 15th year as a regional manager for a medical supply company, and this cruise aboard Royal Caribbean's Wonder of the Seas was her reward. She brought her husband Rick, their 16-year-old son Aiden, and because Rebecca never truly stops working, she brought me, her personal assistant. I had never been on a cruise before. The sight of that floating city rising above the terminal, its stacks of balcony cabins resembling terraced apartments, felt surreal. Within 72 hours, I would learn that even on a ship carrying thousands of people, a teenage boy could be targeted by a predator hiding in plain sight. The first 2 days passed in a comfortable rhythm. Monday we docked in Nassau. The Carters paid for a dolphin swimming excursion, while I chose to wander Bay Street, purchasing small souvenirs. Aiden begged to rent a jet ski, but his parents refused, citing excessive cost and questionable paperwork. He sulked briefly, then wandered off to the arcade. That was typical for him. Brief storms of teenage moodiness followed by bursts of charm that melted everyone's resistance. Tuesday was a full day at sea. The ship felt smaller than before, corridors now familiar, cafes mapped in my mind like a shopping mall where I had worked for years. Aiden bounced between the basketball court and the teen club, quickly making friends with other high school kids grateful for freedom from parental supervision. We saw him only at meals, hair damp from various pools, face pink from sun, always promising he would return to the cabin before midnight. That promise held until Tuesday night. The evening was calm, the ocean so flat it looked iron smooth. We ate in the main dining room at the early seating. Aiden barely touched his pasta, mentioning that a girl from Colorado had invited him to karaoke up on deck 15. Rebecca rolled her eyes but let him go after dessert. I attended an ice show in the large theater, then wandered the Royal Promenade, watching a 90s-themed street party unfold beneath a ceiling painted to resemble twilight. Around 11, I stopped at the Rising Tide bar, which moves between decks like a slow elevator. I drank 1 glass of wine, felt the floor breathing beneath my shoes, and decided that was enough for a work trip. By midnight, I was in my interior cabin on deck 10, headphones on, scrolling half-heartedly through social media until sleep took me. If you're enjoying this story, do me a favor and drop a comment below telling me which cruise line you've sailed with. Have you ever felt unsafe on a ship? A hard knock jolted me awake. At first, I thought it was part of a dream, but it came again, quick and urgent. I checked my phone. 1:32 in the morning. I opened the door to find Rebecca standing there in gym shorts and bare feet, eyes wide as plates. "Is Aiden with you?" she said. My mind was still cloudy. I frowned. No, why would he be? She pushed past me into the room anyway, scanning the small space as if her son might be hiding behind the desk chair. He never came back. Rick fell asleep with the TV on, and when I woke up a minute ago, his bed was empty. Every trace of drowsiness left my bloodstream instantly. Rebecca paced, phone clenched white in her fist. "He has asthma," she kept repeating, though we both knew he rarely used an inhaler anymore. We called his number. Straight to voicemail. I pulled on sneakers. Rebecca slipped into sandals. The hallway outside was quiet, carpet dimly lit by night bulbs. Somewhere far below, engines thrummed steady as a heartbeat. What we were about to discover would make us question whether anyone is truly safe on a cruise ship, especially at night. At guest services on deck 5, the night supervisor, a small woman named Claire, listened with practiced calm. She took Aiden's full name, cabin number, and last known location. "Because he's a minor," she said carefully, "ship security must be alerted immediately." She spoke into a radio using codes I didn't understand. A discreet announcement, bright star, deck 15 forward," sounded over the crew channel only. Passengers asleep in their cabins heard nothing. Security officers met us near the elevators, led by a broad-shouldered man named Victor. He asked for a recent photo. Rebecca scrolled to one from that afternoon, Aiden laughing beside the pickleball court. Victor sent the image to every guard on duty. Then he asked the difficult question, "Any reason your son might want to leave the ship?" Rebecca shook her head so violently it looked painful. "He's afraid of deep water. He can barely swim." We began searching immediately. Victor took decks 2 through 8 with a second team. Claire checked cabin logs in case Aiden had keyed into someone else's room. Rebecca and I followed another guard, Marta, toward the upper decks. We passed closed storefronts, rows of sleeping lounge chairs, silent arcade games glowing red and green in the darkness. On the pool deck, the only movement came from towel bins shivering in the wind. The soft rush of water below the hull sounded like static on a broken radio. At the teen club, lights were out, doors locked. A security tag recorded the last exit at 12:07. The sports bar next door was empty, except for a bartender wiping counters while an NBA game replayed overhead. He swore he hadn't seen a kid in a blue NASA hoodie, Aiden's last known outfit. We checked the jogging track, the miniature golf course, the dark corners behind lifeboats where smokers huddled during daylight hours. No sign. Rebecca's breathing grew ragged. She kept muttering, he could be anywhere. Anywhere. I knew exactly what she was picturing. A railing, a stumble, black water swallowing a careless step. Crew members fall sometimes. Passengers do too. The ocean keeps its secrets. At 2:15 in the morning, when hope was beginning to fade, Marta's voice crackled over the radio with words that made my blood run cold. I have a possible on deck 16 forward, starboard side. Rebecca bolted before anyone could stop her. I sprinted after her, past the Flowrider surf simulator, past stacked lounge chairs toward the open bow. The deck lights were sparse up here, leaving wide patches of deep shadow. Spray from the bow blew cool on our faces. We found Aiden near the forward observation rail, the place where couples posed for romantic photos during daylight hours. He stood very still, hands buried in hoodie pockets, shoulders hunched high by his ears. Beside him, half turned away, stood a tall man dressed head to toe in black. Black jeans, black zip-up track jacket, black baseball cap pulled low over his face. The wind pressed the jacket tight against his frame, showing how thin he was, almost unnaturally lanky. Rebecca called her son's name, voice cracking with relief and fear. Aiden jerked as if waking from a trance. The man in black looked over his shoulder. I saw only a pale slice of cheek, dark stubble on his jaw. No logo on the cap. No name tag. No identification of any kind. Just that flat black shadow where his eyes should have been. We rushed forward. The stranger didn't hurry. He simply angled his body between us and the stairwell leading down to deck 15, then walked away with hands loose at his sides, his stride unhurried and confident. By the time we reached Aiden, the stranger had vanished down the stairs. Before we continue, please hit that subscribe button. Stories like this need to be shared, and your subscription helps us reach more people who need to hear the truth about cruise ship safety. Victor and 2 more guards appeared within seconds. Rebecca clutched her son, shaking him gently as if to restart a stalled heart. He wouldn't meet her eyes. Marta radioed a description of the stranger. Male approximately 6'2", all black clothing, unknown nationality. Security split up, chasing different stairwells. Rebecca and I guided Aiden inside through the solarium doors, out of the wind. His face was gray, lips nearly blue. He wasn't crying, but he trembled so violently that the zipper on his hoodie clicked against itself. We found a quiet corner near a towel stand. I asked him what had happened. For a long time, he said nothing, just stared at the floor. Finally, in a voice so low we had to lean close, he answered. He said the view is better at night. Said nobody comes up here. I felt ice water run down my spine. Did he touch you? Aiden shook his head quickly. He just talked. Asked where I lived. What grade I was in. If I liked movies. He swallowed hard. When I said I should go, he said, "Wait 1 more minute." His hands balled into fists. He kept looking around like he was waiting for someone else. Rebecca closed her eyes. Did he tell you his name? Another headshake. Did he try to get you to walk with him somewhere? A pause, then a tiny nod. Down to deck 4. He said there's a door to the crew deck where you can sit right above the water. Like flying, he said. Aiden's voice broke. I got scared. Then you yelled and he left. But here's what terrified us most. Security never found the man in black. They checked CCTV footage immediately. Cameras showed him and Aiden stepping onto deck 16 at 12:58. The man always kept his cap pulled low, face shadowed and unidentifiable. At 2:37, he slipped down the starboard stairwell. 2 decks below, a camera picked up a blur, a dark figure moving toward the back of the ship, but then he simply vanished. No cabin keycard was tied to that description. No employee matched his clothing. The housekeeping inventory showed no missing linens or spare coveralls that could have been used as a disguise. Victor admitted privately that some passengers occasionally sneak additional people aboard in port, paying crew members to look the other way, though it's rare on such a large vessel. Royal Caribbean security logged the incident as suspicious person, outcome undetermined. Aiden refused to leave the cabin for the remaining 30 hours of the cruise. He lay on the lower bunk with earbuds in, watching movies with subtitles. Rebecca ordered room service and kept the curtains closed. Rick tried to act calm, joking about teenage drama, but each laugh came out thin and brittle. When Wonder of the Seas docked back in Port Canaveral on Friday morning, the sun was bright and ordinary. Passengers gathered in the theater, color-coded luggage tags ready. Rebecca hugged me, thanked me for staying calm, and promised a week off once we caught up on emails. Aiden mumbled goodbye, eyes fixed on his phone. Outside, as we waited for the parking lot shuttle, I watched families posing for photos beside a giant anchor statue. Kids waved paper flags, already begging for the next vacation. Seagulls screamed overhead. The ship loomed behind us, balconies stacked like honeycomb. Somewhere inside, maybe in a stairwell no camera could reach, a man in black could still be hiding, ready for the next sailing, the next curious teenager who wanted to see the ocean at night. Most passengers would never know. They would dance at sail away, eat at the buffet, sleep beneath the gentle rock of the sea, trusting bright lights and electronic keycards to keep danger far away. I still hear the wind-up on that forward deck, the deep hush of endless water below. It reminds me that on a ship, freedom and risk live side by side, separated by little more than a waist-high rail and a sliver of darkness where a stranger can wait unseen. But the final story I need to share might be the most disturbing of all, because it reveals how easily death can hide in plain sight while people laugh and relax just inches away. I booked a 5-night sailing on Celebrity Equinox that departed Fort Lauderdale on a warm Thursday afternoon in late September 2008. I had been working double shifts at the hospital all summer, and the idea of blue water and unlimited buffets felt like oxygen to my exhausted soul. The first afternoon aboard was the usual blur: lifeboat drills, frozen drinks, and the white roar of the ship's wake sliding away toward the Florida coast. By sunset, we were already past Key West, the island's lights flickering off our starboard side. I turned in early, determined to make the most of the next 4 days. But what I would learn on this voyage would make me question whether I could ever feel safe in a hot tub again. Friday stretched out lazily and brightly. We were at sea, heading for Cozumel, with nothing but cobalt water in every direction. After breakfast, I strolled deck 14, the solarium level, where 2 hot tubs steamed beneath a glass roof. The ship carried more than 3,000 passengers, yet the area felt oddly hushed in the mid-morning lull. The hot tubs were half full of people dozing in the bubbles, eyes hidden behind cheap sunglasses, floating in silence like mannequins on display. All day long, that image stayed with me. Something about it felt wrong, though I couldn't articulate why. Late that night, long after most guests had filtered out, I was restless and decided to look for coffee. The Ocean View Cafe on Deck 14 keeps a pot going for insomniacs, and I figured the walk would help me burn off the tiramisu I regretted eating at dinner. Near the aft stairwell, I found a lone crewman dragging a mop bucket toward the pool doors. He wore the white jumpsuit of housekeeping staff and a name tag that read Luis. I held the door so he could roll his cart through. He thanked me in soft Spanish-accented English. Out here, surrounded by nothing but water and night, conversation with a stranger felt strangely intimate. I asked how long he had been at sea. 7 contracts, he said, which meant almost 7 years with only brief breaks at home in Honduras. He never let the mop handle stop moving, sweeping a slow circle around the deck chairs as he spoke. I mentioned that the hot tub seemed to stay busy no matter the hour. At that, Luis paused. He leaned on the mop as though weighing whether to speak. Then he asked if I wanted to hear something unsettling. The way he said it, unsettling, sounded like both a warning and a challenge. Maybe I was just bored because I told him to go ahead. What he told me next would change how I saw every cruise ship forever. Luis glanced around the empty deck, lowering his voice even though no one was near. 2 cruises ago, first night out of port, he began. A man died in the starboard hot tub. He said the words without drama, almost like reciting a checklist. Cardiac arrest. That's what the doctor wrote later. But for hours, no one noticed. He told me the facts in an even factual way. The Equinox had sailed the same route in April of that year, only 2 hours past Fort Lauderdale when it happened. A middle-aged passenger traveling with his wife and teenage son slipped away from the welcome aboard show and decided to soak alone before bed. According to security footage later reviewed, he eased himself into the bubbling water at 9:47, leaned back against the fiberglass lip, and never moved again. The ship's live band was playing on the opposite side of the pool deck, masking any unusual sounds. Warm water, chlorine, and steam rose around him like a curtain. His sunglasses stayed in place. His head rested against the molded pillow. His arms drifted at his sides. He looked asleep. Maybe a little rude for not answering when spoken to, but nothing more. If this story is making your heart race, make sure you hit that like button. And leave a comment telling me, would you ever use a cruise ship hot tub after hearing this? Between 10 and midnight, at least 6 other guests used the same hot tub. A couple in their 20s climbed in and sat only a foot away, talking about drink specials without acknowledging the silent man. An older woman dipped her toes, decided the water was too warm, and left. 2 college guys in baseball caps spent 20 minutes comparing shore excursion prices, practically shouting inches from the man's face. Nobody realized he was gone. Humans are uncomfortable staring at strangers, Luis explained. We glance, we judge, and we look away. The rolling motion of the ship kept his body wedged upright in the jets, so nothing about his posture screamed danger. Everything changed when Luis's co-worker, a supervisor named Arjun, began the nightly closing sweep. At 12:18, Arjun tapped the rim of the tub to announce it was time to clear the area. The young couple slid out, toweling off. The dead man stayed put, chin tilted toward the ceiling. Arjun spoke louder, thinking the passenger might be drunk. When he reached out to nudge the man's shoulder, his hand sank deeper than it should have, as if touching unset plaster. The body folded sideways, slipping under the foam. Arjun shouted for help. Within seconds, 3 more crew members arrived. They hit the emergency call button on the wall. Medical staff sprinted up 2 decks with a defibrillator, but it was obvious from the first pulse check that the man had been gone for hours. They lifted him onto a stretcher, water streaming off his cruise line-branded swim trunks, and covered him with a towel out of respect. A shipboard physician pronounced the time of death, 12:24. But here's what really haunts me about this story. The protocol on cruise ships is precise, almost clinical. Equinox keeps a small refrigerated compartment on deck 3, starboard side, labeled Guest Services Bereavement. It's the morgue. Luis had only seen it twice. They wheeled the body there through back corridors guests rarely notice, elevator doors locked to staff keycards only. The family, wife and son, were awakened in their cabin by the staff captain and a doctor. Their wails echoed through the corridor, but no other passenger heard. Publicly, the cruise continued without pause. The Calypso band struck up on schedule the next morning. The buffet carved its roast. Trivia contests and pool volleyball went on exactly as planned. The cruise line comped drinks for the grieving family and quietly arranged an emergency flight home from Cozumel. Outside that circle of crew and relatives, no one knew. Luis delivered these details in a flat rhythm, like listing emergency exits on a plane. When he finished, the only sound was the hiss of water jets and the faint creak of deck chairs rocking in the swell. I realized my coffee had gone cold. For a moment, I pictured myself slipping under that same water, lungs filling, while other passengers laughed 2 feet away, never seeing, never knowing. I thanked Luis, unsure why, and headed to the buffet for a fresh cup. The lights felt too bright there, all the stainless steel surfaces too sterile, too clean. I didn't sleep well that night. My cabin on deck 8 was midship, theoretically the steadiest part of the vessel. Yet the mattress seemed to rise and fall as if remembering the water beneath us. Sometime after 3 in the morning, I got up and opened the balcony door. What I saw made my blood turn to ice. Down on the pool deck, I could see 2 silhouettes drifting in the forward hot tub, heads thrown back in identical poses. Both wore sunglasses, even though it was pitch black outside. I blinked, half convinced my overtired brain was stitching Luis's story into reality. Then one figure moved, reaching to splash water on his companion, and I exhaled in relief. They were alive. Still, I closed the balcony door and tried to persuade myself that the Equinox was no more dangerous than any floating hotel. Saturday in Cozumel, we docked beside 3 other ships. Tourists poured onto the pier in a festive migration. I joined a jeep excursion to a beach, ate grilled fish under a thatched roof, and tried desperately to shake the unease Luis's story had planted in my mind. By sunset, we were sailing again, this time toward Grand Cayman. The captain announced calm seas. A violin quartet played in the foyer. It should have felt perfect. Around 11 that night, I stopped by the internet cafe to send a photo to my sister. On the way back, curiosity, or something darker, pulled me toward the pool deck. The area was almost empty. Most passengers were at the late comedy show in the theater. The starboard hot tub, the one from Luis's story, glowed turquoise under underwater LEDs. Steam drifted up in gentle wisps. A single man sat there, shoulders submerged, head tipped back, sunglasses impossible to read in the blue light. He looked about my age, maybe 40, with stubble and a football team rash guard. An empty cocktail glass rested on the edge near his left hand. No one else was in sight. Before I tell you what happened next, please make sure you're subscribed to this channel and that notifications are turned on. You won't want to miss what happens in our next video. I hovered by a deck chair, pretending to check my phone. The man never moved. The only sign of life was the ripple of water across his chest. 5 minutes ticked by. I told myself I was being ridiculous, but unease twisted in my stomach. I stepped closer and cleared my throat. "You good, buddy?" My voice sounded too loud in the open air. He didn't answer. I took another step. Chlorine-scented vapor curled into my face. The man's chest rose, barely. I saw it now, the slow up and down, but it was shallow, dangerously so. Drunk, I thought. Or maybe worse. 2 years as an ER nurse had taught me what a non-responsive slump often means. I tapped his knee. "Hey man, you okay? Need medical?" His head lolled to the side, mouth parting slightly, but no words came. A fresh wave rolled under the ship, rocking the water. His shoulders started to slip down. I reached over, bracing him with both hands to keep him upright. The skin under my palms was warm but clammy. His pulse throbbed weakly at the neck. I hit the red emergency button on the wall. Sirens didn't blare. Instead, a silent strobe flashed on a staff panel. Within a minute, 2 security officers hustled up the steps, followed by a medic in a white polo carrying an orange bag. They lifted the man under his arms, water cascading onto the deck. One officer asked if I'd seen him consume alcohol. I answered honestly, I had no idea. They laid him flat on a towel, applied a pulse oximeter, and started oxygen via pocket mask. The medic's face remained calm, practiced, professional. After assessing and finding a faint but stable pulse, they bundled him onto a stretcher and whisked him toward the elevator. Only then did I notice Luis standing at the rail, mop in hand, watching the scene unfold. Our eyes met across the deck. He gave a small nod, like a teacher to a student who finally understands the lesson. The hot tub churned on, empty now, foam circling endlessly around the drain. I smelled the faint odor of bleach mixing with night air, and something in me shivered. Not a dramatic, cliché shiver, just the subtle electric jolt of reality snapping into sharp focus. The next morning, the cruise director cheerfully announced that a passenger had experienced a brief medical event and was resting comfortably in the infirmary. We were assured all services remained on schedule. Guests applauded at the news before turning their attention to the omelet station. I thought of the April family, blindsided by grief in their cabin while life carried on around them. The ship, utterly indifferent to personal tragedy. That afternoon, I ran into Luis near the crew stairwell. He said the man from the tub had a blood alcohol level of 0.26 and likely would have slipped under the water if no one had intervened. "He'll go home with a story," Luis said quietly. "But he'll go home." We stood in silence for a while, the floor vibrating beneath us from the massive engines. I asked how he managed the emotional weight of working in a place where vacation and disaster could share the same deck. He shrugged. "The ocean is big," he said. "We can only keep our eyes open." On the final morning, dawn broke pink over Key West as we angled back toward Fort Lauderdale. I sipped black coffee on my balcony and watched passengers pack their luggage tags, eager to return to their normal lives. Somewhere below on Deck 3, the morgue remained cold and quiet, with no occupant this particular voyage. The pool deck loungers were still wet from overnight cleaning, their white straps glistening. Crew members folded towels into swans, arranging them on each chair so the first sunbathers would feel welcomed. Vacation brochures never show that narrow steel door labeled bereavement. They don't mention that most large cruise ships carry enough body bags for a small town, because death rarely respects holiday itineraries. Standing there in the early light, I understood how thin the line is between carefree escape and something final. These 3 stories are completely true. They happened to real people on real cruise ships. The Alaska tragedy made international headlines. The Predator in Black was never found. And cruise ships do carry morgues because death at sea is more common than most people realize. If these stories have opened your eyes to the reality of cruise ship safety, please share this video with anyone you know who's planning a cruise. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications because we share true stories like this every week. And most importantly, leave a comment below telling me, after hearing these stories, would you still book a cruise? Or have these tales changed your mind forever? Stay safe out there, and remember, Paradise isn't always what it seems when you're surrounded by thousands of strangers in the middle of the ocean with nowhere to run. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.